Let's watch this.
Royal Highnesses, distinguished members of the Norwegian Nobel Committee, citizens of the world, my dear Venezuelans. First, I want to express our infinite gratitude from my family, from an entire country, to the Norwegian Nobel Committee. Thanks to you, the struggle of an entire people for truth, for freedom, for democracy and peace is today recognized around the world. I am here on behalf of my mother, María Corina Machado, who has united millions of Venezuelans in an extraordinary effort that you, our hosts, have honored with the Nobel Peace Prize. But although she has not been able to be here and take part in this ceremony, I must say that my mother never breaks a promise.
I
And
was
that
right.
is
She wasn't
why,
there.
with all the joy in my heart, I can tell you that in just a few hours, we will be able to embrace her here in Oslo after 16 months.
Oh,
living
she
in
did
Finland.
show up. Okay. Okay. Well, this is exciting. I guess she was able to leave Venezuela. Man, I wonder how
And
she's
as
gonna
I
get back to
await that
Venezuela.
moment to hug her, to kiss her, to embrace her after 2 years, I think of the other daughters and sons who do not get to see their mothers today. This is what drives her, what drives all of us. She wants to live in a free Venezuela, and she will never give up on that purpose. That is why we all know, and I know, that she will be back in Venezuela very soon. In the meantime, at this moment, I face the difficult task of giving voice to her words. The speech she prepared for this occasion. This is her speech. I have come here to tell you a story. The story of a people and their long march toward freedom. This march brings me here today as one voice amongst millions of Venezuelans who rose once again to reclaim the destiny that was always theirs. Venezuela was born of audacity, shaped by peoples and cultures intertwined. From Spain, we inherited a language, a culture, and a faith that merged with ancestral indigenous and African roots. In 1811, we wrote the first constitution in the Spanish-speaking world, one of the earliest republican constitutions on earth, affirming the radical idea that every human being carries a sovereign dignity. This constitution
I believe that this constitution was written by Simón Bolívar, the liberator of multiple countries in South America. Um, I think, like, he. I love George Washington. I think he was great in what he did with the United States. But Simón Bolívar was like just a different level, man. Like he really had it over on those Spaniards. He liberated Panama. I think it was Panama, Colombia, Venezuela, Peru, Ecuador, like all those countries he was able to liberate. And he essentially, what he wanted to do is create this one big country called La Gran Colombia, which essentially encompassed all those countries that he essentially liberated, right? But I think before he even became, I think he was the first president of those countries, but he died 1 year later of some type of illness. Um, but it's essentially his legacy carried on, and right now he's turning over on his grave so much, especially since he was born in what essentially is now Caracas, Venezuela.
enshrined citizenship, individual rights, religious liberty, and separation of powers. Our ancestors carried liberty on their backs. They crossed an entire continent from the banks of the Orinoco to the heights of the Potosí to help give rise to societies of free and equal citizens, out of the conviction that freedom is never whole unless it is shared. From the beginning, we believed something simple and immense, that all human beings are born to be free. That conviction became our national soul. In the 20th century, the earth opened. In 1922, the Reventón in La Rosa erupted for 9 days, a fountain of oil and possibility. In peace, we turned that sudden wealth into an engine for knowledge and imagination.
I wanted to add also the fact that Venezuela even became rich with their, oil reserves and having such oil reserves, all of that was because of the United States. They were the ones that basically built what we would know as what would facilitate in the extraction of the oil in Venezuela and help them become one of the richest nations in South America, right? Which is why there were so many American investors and so much American migration into Venezuela. Venezuela had, if you see the United States right now with the amount of immigration that they have and the diverse culture that they have, that was essentially like Venezuela was technically a mini the United States, except not as capitalistic. Um, and all with this speech, and hopefully with what Donald Trump does, and hopefully Maria Corina becoming the next president, which I hope it's her and Nat Edmundo, all of that will come back. It won't. It's obviously going to take a long time, probably more than 10 years, right? But nothing is that fast. But it really brings hope, and hopefully Venezuela would become one of the biggest allies to the United States because of that.
The ingenuity of our scientists, we eradicated disease. We built universities of global prestige, museums and concert halls, sent thousands of Venezuelans abroad through scholarships, trusting that free minds would return as transformation. Our cities glowed with the kinetic art of Cruz Diez and Soto. We forged steel, aluminum, and hydropower, proof that Venezuela could build anything it dared to envision. But Venezuela also became a refuge. We opened our arms to migrants and exiles from every corner of the world. Spaniards fleeing civil war, Italians and Portuguese escaping poverty and dictatorship, Jews after the Holocaust, Chileans, Argentinians, and Uruguayans escaping military regimes, Cubans escaping communism, and families from Colombia, Lebanon, and Syria seeking peace.
Like I said, Venezuela was a safe haven for so many people until it got fucked.
We gave them homes, schools, and safety, and they became Venezuelans. This is Venezuela. We built a democracy that became the most stable in Latin America, and freedom unfolded as a creative force. But even the strongest democracy weakens when its citizens forget that freedom is not something we wait for, but something we become. It is a deliberate personal choice, and the sum of those choices forms the civic ethos that must be renewed.
And that's what socialism always does. It tries to manipulate the people that are in the most in need, and essentially promises things that can't really happen, right? Because as much as you may want to get free things, because that's essentially what socialism is taking away from essentially the people that create jobs for your country, and redistributes that money, right? why would these corporations want to build companies within a country that's basically going to take away all the money after creating jobs for your people and redistributing it to essentially people that refuse to work. I'm going to say refuse to work because there is a vast majority of people that prefer to be on welfare than to dedicate their lives to something that they could be proud of, right? Um, and that is essentially the problem with trying to put socialism in Latin America, because this concept of la viveza criolla, which is to take it, basically find the easiest way to reach a destination and not put in the hard work, just does not match with the concept of socialism at all, right? And that is essentially what happened to Venezuela. Hugo Chavez promised socialism. In an interview, he literally said, he was asked, if someone else gets voted, would you leave office? He said, of course, the democratic process is very important to me. He wiped his ass with those words and decided to just continue fucking with the citizens. And now we have this, which, let me tell you, Chavez is nothing compared to Maduro, because Chavez actually had more than three brain cells. Maduro literally once said that he spoke to a fucking bird, and that bird was Chavez.
Every day. The concentration of oil revenues in the state created perverse incentives. It gave the government immense power over society, which turned into privilege and corruption. My generation was born in a vibrant democracy, and we took it for granted. We assumed freedom was as permanent as the air we breathed. We cherished our rights, but we forgot our duties. I was raised by a father whose life's work, building, creating, serving, taught me that loving a country meant assuming responsibility for its future. By the time we recognized how fragile our institutions had become, a man who had once led a military coup to overthrow democracy was elected president. Many thought charisma could substitute the rule of law. From 1991 onward, the regime dismantled our democracy, violating the Constitution, falsifying our history, corrupting the military, purging independent judges, censoring the press, manipulating elections, persecuting dissent, and ravaging our extraordinary biodiversity. Oil wealth was not used to uplift, but to bind. Washing machines and refrigerators were handed out on national television to families living on dirt floors.
You see, this is the socialism part. They're giving out washing machines to families living on dirt floors, and obviously these people have hard times, but you're essentially taking money from people that are trying to improve the economy of this country, right? And here's a perfect example. With her, what she's explaining, she's giving the perfect example of why socialism doesn't work, and why I'm gonna bring this to U.S. politics right now with the mayoral race in New York. Why what Mamdani wants to do will only fuck New York further. And I'm not gonna say next Venezuela, because Venezuela has been like this forever, and New York is just a fucking city, and we are a whole fucking country, so we could, you know, crisis management that bullshit. But you know, obviously, what's gonna happen to New York? It was gonna happen because people are like children. The parent could tell the child, "Don't do this. I have experience. You're gonna get fucked," and like this, and just like that, that child isn't gonna understand until he climbs the fucking tree, falls down, and breaks an ankle. And guess what? After he breaks that ankle, it's not gonna happen again. So the right now, the New York City is gonna be an experiment, and as I will expect, that experiment is gonna fail. right? Because it fucking failed in Venezuela.
Not as progress, but as spectacle. Apartments meant for social housing were handed to a select few with a condition for unquestionable obedience. And then came the
And this is where fascism, this is, by the way, this is what fascism is, not what Donald Trump is doing, okay? Because there's this fucking big ass conspiracy theory that Donald Trump is a fascist, he's a fucking Nazi. No, fuck you all. This is what fascism looks like, is compliance for free shit, which that's essentially what socialism is. Compliance, you give us compliance, we'll give you free shit, and we'll take it away from the people that are putting in effort to make a living. And that's exactly what where Chavistas come from, people that ended up complying. And you know, the political spectrum, I don't see it as a line, I see it as a circle, right? And if you look at well, I don't have a quarter with me, but if you look at a quarter, right, and you look at it like this, right, you have my hand. Let's say this side is the starting point, like middle. This is middle ground. These are moderates, right? If you go, let me see what is right for you guys. Let's see. I move my finger. Okay, that is left. Okay, so to the left, right, you have your socialism, you have your communism. And to the right, you have conservatism. I really don't know what exactly would be anything right. But if you go far left and far right, you end up in the back. And what is the back? That is fascism. You go too much to the left, you go too much to the right, you end up at the same fucking place. Okay? So fascism and all that stuff isn't just one party. You go too far and you'll end up right at this point, right? But there isn't a real point. Hold on. This thing is going to track me now. Um, there isn't a real point on the right. I don't think there has. Like, I actually have to study this, but I don't think there's an actual like socioeconomic like party or like idea that is even close to fascism, right? Well, you could maybe say authoritarianism. I guess that would be on the right, but like I said, once again, socialism ends up becoming fascism or authoritarianism, right? Because in order to preserve like these ideas, you have to make everyone comply. Not everyone's going to comply, right? That's why capitalism right now is the best socioeconomic um idea that exists until something better comes along the way. But I don't know if there's ever going to be anything better, right? The to reach capitalism, it took us many years to reach this point. Essentially, it took the United States becoming a country.
ruin, obscene corruption, historic looting. During the regime's rule, Venezuela received more oil revenue than in the previous century combined, and it was all stolen. Oil money became a tool to purchase loyalty abroad, while at home, criminal and international terrorist groups fused themselves to the state. The economy collapsed by more than 80%. Poverty surpassed 86%. Today, 9 million Venezuelans have been forced to flee. These are not statistics, they're open wounds. Meanwhile, something deeper and more corrosive took place. It was a deliberate method to divide society by ideology, by race.
You see this shit? You see? Oh my God! She just described what's going on right now in the United States. The Democrats are actively trying to do this bullshit. separate us by race. The most racist people are Democrats. Not once. Yes, you do have some bad actors on the Republican side, okay, but that is not the vast majority of who they are, right? I used to be a Democrat. I used to be part of that party until they went haywire and everything became about identity politics, which is the biggest bullshit in the world. No one cares about identity. What they care is if they could put food on their table the next day. We need to stop talking about this bullshit and just come together and, vote for someone that will actually help us financially in a capitalistic way, not fucking socialism. That's bullshit.
By origin, by ways of life, pushing Venezuelans to distrust one another, to silence one another, to see enemies in one another. They smothered us, they took us prisoners, they killed us, and they forced us into exile. It had been almost 3 decades of fighting against a brutal dictatorship, and we had tried everything. Dialogues betrayed, protests of millions crushed, elections perverted. Hope collapsed entirely, and belief in any kind of future became impossible. The idea of change.
And by the way, this is why the United States has uh, the right to bear arms to prevent this bullshit from happening, right? Obviously, at this point in our history, the right to bear arm is right. My belief is that the right to bear arm is more like a facade. It's not real. I don't think that the average American could really fight the U.S. military. Um, I don't think we could really combat a stealth bomber people guys, but you know if Venezuelans had the right to bear arms, this would have been over 5 years after this whole bullshit started. But we're basically almost 3 decades in, and they cast their vote. 90% of them vote for the opposition leader, but they falsify everything on propagandized media, and they may protest, but they can't do too much because they'll be killed. Um, so to all the assholes saying that they don't want this to whatever Donald Trump is doing to proceed, fuck you all. Because these people are suffering, and you guys are too small minded to realize that this is going to benefit both you economically, because Venezuela is going to be very willing to give you oil and reduce those gas prices that everyone is really struggling with, especially in fucking California, that has a fucking communist, in my opinion, allegedly, a communist person leading this country, the state. And everywhere else in the United States, the gas prices are at around $3, and in California they're $4 and above. That's stupid. But let's continue.
Which seemed either naive or crazy. It seemed impossible. Yet from the very depths of that despair, a step that seemed modest, almost procedural, changed the course of our history. We decided against all odds to run a primary election. And unlike any act of rebellion, we chose to trust people, to rediscover one another. We traveled by road and by dirt path in a country with gasoline shortages, daily blackouts, and collapsing communications. Forbidding from advertising, without money or media willing to speak our names, we crossed it only with our conviction. Word of mouth was our network of hope, and it spread faster than any campaign, because our desire for freedom was very much alive within us, and it had never died. The forced migration that was meant to fracture us instead united us around one sacred purpose: to
Fucking
reunite our families in our land. Grandparents confided in me their greatest fear: dying before meeting their grandchildren abroad. Little girls with voices too small for such sorrow begged me to bring back their mothers and siblings scattered across the continent. Our pain fused into one heartbeat: bring our children home now. In May 2023, during a rally in the town of Nirgua, a teacher named Carmen came up to me. She told me she had just run into her jefa de calle. A jefa de calle is a regime agent assigned to Carmen's block who decides, house by house, who receives a monthly food bag and who is punished with hunger. Shocked to see this woman there in that rally, Carmen asked her, "Why are you here?" And the jefa de calle replied, "My only son, who fled to Peru, asked me to be here today. He told me that if María Corina wins, he will return home. Tell me what I have to do."
You see, that's what what I told you guys, that Venezuelans are so prideful in their country and their countrymen that once shit gets fixed, they will mass exodus every single country they are in right now, because their love for their country is so deep rooted that they're willing to, like, if it weren't because they were killing people in Venezuela, they would have suffered through everything and stay there. But since they were forced to just leave because they couldn't eat, two, like, the quality of living, like, if those people in New York think that it was bad living how they were living, even the poorest people in New York, they don't know how fucking bad it was in Venezuela. They have no idea.
I'll do anything. That day, love defeated fear. 2 weeks later, we reached Delicias, a tiny village swallowed by Colombian guerrillas and drug traffickers, where not even a chicken can be sold without their permission. No candidate had gone there since 1978. And as the team climbed the mountain, I saw Venezuelan flags waving from every humble home. I naively asked, as if it was a national holiday that merited all the flags, and someone whispered, "No, here the flags are hidden. Bringing it out is dangerous." Today, people raise them to thank you for daring to come. You will leave, but we will remain identified. That day, entire families stood up to the armed groups that ruled their lives. And when we sang the national anthem together, sovereignty returned in a single fragile, defiant chorus. That day, courage defeated oppression. Our gatherings became intimate encounters of thousands. We embraced, we cried, we prayed. We understood our struggle was much more than electoral. It was an ethical struggle for truth, an existential struggle for life, and a spiritual struggle for good. With less than a year before the presidential election, we had to unite every democratic force and restore trust in the votes. The primaries became that moment.
It was a trust in the votes that obviously didn't come to fruition, um, because it's a fucking dictatorship. And unless you have weapons, like, that's not gonna happen, you know? And It's just a pity because these people came out in swarms to vote. There were even elections that were I think there were ballots that were done here in the even in the United States. I'm not entirely sure about that, so don't fucking clip me on that. But like these people suffered so much, and I haven't experienced this suffering. My grandma is still in Venezuela, and you know she has dementia, so like she can't even really understand what's going on. So, but like you know, even though she has dementia, I hope she gets to see. No matter how she won't even fucking remember, she won't even really understand. Hope that she will be able to see a Venezuela that's free and it's prosperous once again, because she lived through those prosperous years. Let's continue.
A self-organized civic effort that built a nationwide citizen network unlike anything Venezuela had ever seen. And on October 22nd of 2023, against all odds, Venezuela awoke. The diaspora, which was a third of our nation, reclaimed its right to vote. The son who had left cast his ballot alongside the mother who stayed. Lines stretched for blocks. Turnout was so overwhelming that ballots actually ran out. We trusted the people, and they trusted us back. What began as a mechanism to legitimize leadership became the rebirth of a nation's confidence in itself. That day, I received a mandate, a responsibility that transcended any individual ambition. I felt humbled and profoundly aware the weight with which I had been entrusted. Threatened by that truth, though, the regime prohibited me from running for president. It was a harsh blow, but mandates belong to the people. We set out to find another candidate who could take my place. Edmundo González Urrutia stepped forward, a calm.
By the way, that's kind of stupid because even though I'm just gonna say Nicolas Maduro isn't even Venezuelan. He is Colombian. He should not even be the president of Venezuela, because you're supposed to be a Venezuelan born citizen in order to become president of Venezuela. So the fact that she was unable to run for president, what's dictatorships, right?
Brave former diplomat. The regime believed he posed no threat, but they underestimated the resolve of millions of citizens, a plural, vibrant society that in all its diversity found unity in a common purpose. Communities, political parties, unions, students, and civil society stood together and worked as one so that the voice of a nation could be heard. We were 3 months from election day, and almost no one knew his name. But votes were not enough. We had to defend them. For over a year, we had been building the infrastructure to do so. 600,000 volunteers across 30,000 polling stations, apps to scan QR codes, digital platforms, diaspora call centers. We deployed scanners, Starlink antennas, and laptops hidden inside fruit trucks to the furthest corners of Venezuela.
this is crazy. Like they put so much effort into getting these people to vote. They did every possible little thing. They put Starlink networks up so these people could go vote, and it was in vain. But hopefully it's not so much in vain 3 year 2 well that it will be 3 years later after those votings where the vast majority of the Venezuelans voted against the opposition leader. Sorry, for the opposition leader and against Nicolas Maduro. And a vote that was never upheld, with lies on these propaganda networks. Similar, no, I'm not going to go that far. I'm not going to compare anything to the United States because I don't want a lawsuit. Um, but but anyways, hopefully those votes were not in vain, and hopefully the stupidity of Nicolas Maduro really gets Donald Trump to move forward with what he's going to do, or may ostracize and kick out Nicolas Maduro from there. And it's not just Nicolas Maduro. The vast majority of the people that are observing this conflict, one, they really don't know shit. Two, they don't know that the mastermind behind all of this isn't really Nicolas Maduro, like the mastermind of the regime. It's a someone called Edmundo. No, not Edmundo. Diosdado. Sorry, Edmundo is the one that got voted by the Venezuelan population. Diosdado. Let me see. Let me see his name. Let me see who this fucker's name. Diosdado Cabello. This motherfucker right here is a sack of shit. He is literally a sack of shit. And he has been causing all the problems of, you know, Venezuela. He is the mastermind, and he has caused all this suffering. And look at this. He is part of the United Socialist Party of Venezuela. Socialism does not work. But unfortunately, the people in New York are going to have to suffer through it to get that drilled into their fucking brains. Let's continue.
Technology became a tool for freedom. Secret training sessions were held at dawn in church back rooms, kitchens, and basements, using printed materials that were moved across Venezuela like contraband. Finally, election day arrived on July 28th, 2024. Before dawn, lines wrapped around blocks. A quiet, trembling hope filled the air. Our live tracking showed turnout rising across every state and town. And then the electoral tally sheets, the famous actas. The sacred proof of the people's will began to appear. First by phone, then WhatsApp, then photographs, then scanned, and finally carried by hand, by mule, by canoe. They arrived from everywhere across Venezuela.
You have no idea how much WhatsApp, like, I know in the United States, WhatsApp isn't like really as used so much as it is used in Latin America. WhatsApp keeps everyone connected so much, especially because I think in Venezuela, like the phone lines really don't connect outside of outside of Venezuela to communicate with people, right? So WhatsApp has been like a very pivotal thing to keep everyone communicated with their families outside of Venezuela. And like Venezuela was a very big facilitator in getting the voice out and letting people know we're going to vote. We're going to try to get this regime out, right? Obviously, it was partially in vain because hopefully their hard work will pay off at the end of at the end of the day once Trump does pull forward with this, which will benefit both the U.S. and Venezuela. Don't get it twisted. this will benefit both of them, right? It will probably benefit, well, actually, no, it will benefit both of them pretty much equally in interest, not in like money wise. It will benefit both of them in interest, right? The interest of Venezuela is to be able to have a free market and have the people be able to, you know, live, have food, and work for something better. And for the United States, it's oil. It's always oil. Like Trump wants. He wants the oil.
An eruption of truth, because thousands of citizens risked their freedom to protect them. Confronted with our overwhelming victory, the regime issued a desperate order. Soldiers were to expel our volunteers from voting centers and block them from receiving the original tally sheets they were legally entitled to. But the soldiers disobeyed. Edmundo González Urrutia won with 67% of the vote in every state, city, and village. In every state, city, and village, every single tally sheet told the same story. Within hours, they were digitized and published on a website for the world to see. But the dictatorship responded with terror. 2,500 people kidnapped, disappeared, tortured, homes marked, entire families taken as hostages. Priests, teachers, nurses, students, anyone who dared share a tally sheet was hunted down. These are crimes against humanity, documented.
And by the way, because of this specific thing of people sharing through WhatsApp and all that stuff, now the government, what they essentially do is if you get randomly stopped by a military soldier in Venezuela and they tell you to show them your phone, you have to show them your phone, and they'll go to see if you're talking bad about the Venezuelan regime, right? Which is why maybe you might not be people aren't really saying much within Venezuela about how much they fucking hate this place, right? Because right now it's shut up and survive or get killed, right? So once again, fuck you to all the people that have been marching and protests of whatever this conflict will be, right? I don't want anyone dead, but this is going to benefit both, because if it doesn't happen now, what will happen is people we'll get a fucking another Russia or another China, and it will be a lot worse than those two, because the natural resources that Venezuela has is vastly more impressive than those of China and Russia. It will be on another fucking level.
By the United Nations. State terrorism deployed to bury the will of the people. Some of the more than 220 children detained after the elections were electrocuted, beaten, and suffocated until they repeated the lie the regime needed, falsely incriminating themselves of being paid by me to protest. Women and girls in prison are right now being forced into sexual slavery, made to endure abuse in exchange for a family visit, a meal, or the chance to take a bath. And yet, the Venezuelan people did not surrender. During the past 16 months in clandestinity, we have built new networks of civic pressure and disciplined disobedience, preparing for Venezuela's orderly transition to democracy. That is how we reach this day, a day carrying the echo of millions who stand at the threshold of freedom. This prize carries profound meaning. It reminds the world that democracy is essential to peace. And more than anything, what we Venezuelans can offer the world is the lesson forged through this long and difficult journey, that to have democracy, we must be willing to fight for freedom. And freedom is a choice that must be renewed every day, measured by our willingness and our courage to defend it. For this reason, the cause of Venezuela transcends our borders. A people who choose freedom to contribute not only to themselves, but to humanity. We attain freedom only when we refuse to turn our backs on ourselves, when we confront the truth directly, no matter how painful, when love for what truly matters in life gives us the strength to persevere and to prevail. Only through that inner alignment, that vital integrity, do we rise to meet our destiny. Only then do we become who we truly are, able to live a life worthy of being lived. Along this march to freedom, we gain profound certainties of the soul, truths that have given our lives a deeper meaning and prepared us to build a great future in peace. Therefore, peace is ultimately an act of love. This love has already set our future in motion. Venezuela will breathe again. We will open prison doors and watch thousands who were unjustly detained step into the warm sun, embraced at last by those who never stopped fighting for them. We will see grandmothers settle children on their laps to tell them stories not of distant forefathers, but of their own parents' courage. We will see our students debate ideas passionately and without fear, their voices rising freely at last. We will hug again, fall in love again, hear our streets fill with laughter and music again, and all the simple joys in the world that we have taken for granted will be ours. My dear Venezuelans.
Luckily, we have a constitution that will most likely prevent this, but I really think that a lot of Americans take what we have for granted. Just like the Venezuelans took what they had for granted. But luckily, we have, you know, safe. Our constitution is pretty airtight. Thank God. But there's so many people in this country that take things for granted and support so many countries that do atrocities that, on Twitter there's a lot of people say, why don't you just move to that country, live in that country and see for yourself, which is true. The suffering of these people, there's so many Venezuelans that wish they could have what the United States does. The Venezuela has one of the first constitutions to ever exist, right? Along with during the independence war of Venezuela, I believe George Washington helped Simon Bolivar in the liberation of Venezuela and a lot of other countries, right? And through this, Simon Bolivar got the idea of the Constitution that would become the part of the Republic of Venezuela. But that Constitution wasn't enough. It wasn't as airtight as our Constitution. So I hope that with this speech, this very beautiful speech, all the leftists, and also all the people on the right, liberals, wokies, conservatives, groypers, because apparently that's a movement now, really appreciate what they have in this country. Even as bad as it is now, it could always get worse. Obviously, we are a country that's improving. We want this country to improve. It's getting hard. I'm struggling too, which is why I decided to fucking stream now, because it's been getting hard to get a job. But what we have, we need to appreciate, because the Venezuelans themselves failed to appreciate what they had, and now this is what they have. And hopefully, everyone could learn from this. From the right to the left, especially the left, because they are really following this. Basically, if you gave them an IKEA setup on socialism, they're following the Venezuelan one step by step, which is racial, applying racial differences, saying that we're all different, saying that it's this racist fault, it's that racist fault, so on and so forth. It's creating divide, and that's what brought into power Chavez.
The world has marveled at what we have achieved, and soon it will witness one of the most moving sights of our time: our loved ones coming home. And I will stand again on the Simon Bolivar Bridge, where I once cried the thousands who were leaving, and welcome them back into the luminous life that awaits us. Because in the end, our journey towards freedom has always lived inside us. We are returning to ourselves. We are returning home. Allow me to honor the heroes of this journey: our political prisoners, the persecuted, their families, and all who defend human rights. Those who sheltered us, fed us, and risked everything to protect us. The journalists who refused silence, the artists who carried our voice, my exceptional team, my mentors, my fellow political and social activists, the leaders around the world who joined us and defended our cause. My 3 children, my adored father, my mother, my 3 sisters, my brave and loving husband, who've all supported me throughout my life. And above all, the millions of anonymous Venezuelans who risked their homes, their families, and their lives out of love. To them belongs this honor. To them belongs this day. To them belongs the future. Gracias.
A very beautiful speech, and basically encompasses what we must avoid as a country. We must avoid this idea of socialism that is prevailing so much on the left. with this, I hope both sides could agree on this issue. I hope they could understand that this should be a bipartisan issue. It should not be partisan. Both sides should agree that it is in the best interest of both Venezuelans and the United States that the regime ends in Venezuela. Because, like I said, we have a dumbass running Venezuela right now. What if a Saddam Hussein becomes a leader? Like, people that are actually smart start running a country with the resources that they have. It is easier to get rid of a dumbass than to try to get rid of someone that actually has the ability to rationalize and, eventually create weapons of mass destruction, and it's right in our backyard. The Venezuelan coast is only about 200 nautical miles from Florida. And with the amount of resources that Venezuela has, having part of the Amazon forest in the country, having vast amount of oil, they could really do damage to our country if we don't squash whatever we have now with the dumbass president that believes that he talked to a fucking bird that was the ex-president not Nicolas, Hugo Chavez. This will benefit the American citizens in lower gas prices because now we have a country that is willing to give us oil for cheaper than what it would run for. The cost of transportation of that oil will be significantly less because it's coming straight from Venezuela, which is only, like I said, 200 nautical miles. And for the Republicans, since you guys care so much about the immigration issue, it will cause a mass exodus of Venezuelans back to Venezuela. And you know, that's something you care about. I really don't have problems with that because I think a lot of Venezuelans are doing legal immigration, right? My only problem is illegal immigration. Um, but it's essentially, with this moving forward, it could only be positives for the United States. I do not think there will be ground troops on the grounds of Venezuela. I don't think it'll go that far. I don't. There might be casualties, maybe like some air military assaults, but I highly doubt we're gonna put our U.S. citizens at risk, especially since the Venezuelan military is doo doo next to our our military is a dinosaur. Their military is a tiny mouse. That's how I would compare it. And right now, the Russians are not backing Venezuela. The only concern would maybe be the North Koreans, but the North Koreans aren't going to send troops from their country to another foreign land, especially since they're so airtight with what the perception of these people's the perception of the world is to these people. So I remember when the Democrats really were on the side of the Venezuelans. Now they're just on the side of a fucking dictator at this point. Hopefully things change for the best. This this right here, that that is a smile of hope. a hope for a better future.